What if I told you that the reason you can't stop, the reason you keep going back to the very thing that's destroying you, has nothing to do with willpower, discipline, or moral weakness, and everything to do with an emotional wound buried so deeply inside you that even you can't see it clearly anymore? What if the addiction you think comes from a lack of control is actually a survival mechanism your mind created when you were too young, too overwhelmed, or too alone to know what else to do? And what if every time you reach for a drink, or a cigarette, or a pill, or a distraction, you aren't trying to get high, you're trying to escape a feeling you never learned to face? Addiction doesn't start with a substance. It starts with a moment when reality felt heavier than your heart could hold. A moment when you felt unsafe, unseen, unloved, or emotionally abandoned. A moment when you stood face to face with a pain you had no tools to handle. That moment becomes a wound, and because no one taught you how to heal it, you learned how to numb it. And the numbing worked, at least long enough for you to survive. But survival mechanisms, when repeated, become patterns. And patterns, when repeated long enough, become prisons. People don't get addicted to substances. They get addicted to relief. They get addicted to silence. They get addicted to the temporary moment when the noise in their head fades, when the anxiety loosens its grip, when the shame stops screaming, when the world stops burning, and they can finally, for just a second, breathe. That's why addiction is never about the drug. It's about the pain that came before the drug. And until you understand that pain, until you're willing to look at the wound underneath it all, the behavior will always win. Think about it. Every addiction has a trigger. Not a chemical trigger, an emotional one. You don't drink every time you're thirsty. You drink when the stress gets too heavy. You smoke when the silence gets too loud. You binge when your thoughts start suffocating you. You scroll endlessly when your life feels empty. You run away from reality not because you hate reality, but because reality reminds you of something inside you that hurts. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. People don't become addicted because they're weak. They become addicted because they're wounded. And a wounded mind will always choose comfort over resolution. It will always choose the shortcut over the confrontation. It will always choose the anesthetic over the truth, not because it wants to, but because it doesn't know any other way to survive. Gabor Mate says, the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And he's right. Addiction is a coping mechanism for emotional suffering, a suffering that usually begins long before the first drink, the first hit, the first escape. Children who grow up feeling unsafe, unseen, or unloved learn to disconnect from their emotions because the emotions feel too overwhelming. As adults, that disconnection becomes a personal war inside the mind, a war where substances become allies, not enemies. They become the one thing that helps you feel less broken, less chaotic, less alone, at least for a moment. And that's how addiction traps you. It doesn't lure you with pleasure, it lures you with relief. It doesn't promise happiness, it promises escape. It doesn't make you feel alive, it helps you avoid what feels dead inside. But here's the painful paradox. The very escape you rely on becomes the cage you live in. The very relief you crave becomes the thing that controls you. The very mechanism that helped you survive starts stripping away the very life you were trying to protect. And you don't stop because you can't stop the wound that keeps bleeding behind the addiction. So what do? You start by acknowledging the truth. You don't have a substance problem. You have a pain problem. You don't have an addiction. You have an unhealed wound. You don't need more discipline. You need more understanding. The real path out is not about fighting the addiction. It's about understanding the emotion underneath it. It's about recognizing when you reach for the substance, what you were feeling in that moment, and what emotion you were trying to silence. It's about learning the language of your wound. Maybe you drink because stress feels unbearable. Maybe you smoke because loneliness feels too heavy. Maybe you take pills because anxiety suffocates you. Maybe you binge because emptiness terrifies you. Maybe you escape because staying present feels like torture. Whatever your addiction is communicating something. It is telling you where it hurts. It is pointing you toward the wound you've been avoiding. And here's the most important truth of all. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't break a cycle if you don't understand what started it. You can't stop running until you turn around and face what's chasing you. Healing isn't about quitting the substance. That's only the surface. Real healing is about going inward, finding the emotional wound you hid from yourself, and finally giving it the care, the compassion, and the attention it never received. Because once you heal the pain, the addiction loses its purpose. Once you understand the wound, the behavior becomes unnecessary. Once you face the emotion, the escape stops being your only option. You don't break addiction by becoming stronger. You break addiction by becoming more honest, more aware, more willing to feel what you've avoided for far too long. And when you do, you discover something you never expected. You were never broken. You were never weak. You were never hopeless. You were just hurt and trying your best to survive. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, press the thumbs up and share it with others. It helps spread the message of inner peace and self-discovery. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this.